All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And Ed, welcome, man. So awesome to have you here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so funny. It's always great telling the listeners. I thought we were recording this whole time, so the best stuff we already shared, everybody. It was amazing.
That's right. We already had a conversation, and I was like, Ed, I'm not recording. We got to start recording. And so I'll tell you, Ed, you and I, we go back a long ways, and quite to be candid, we haven't even spoken in a long time either. It's been years. But I mean, man.
Yeah, and even when we spoke, Kevin, I don't believe we ever spent time together.
No, we didn't. It was just casual here and there. Usually at Dan Kennedy or Glazer Kennedy events, it was just casual conversation, like in the lobby or whatever, And so,
absolutely.
And so, but what is really cool is that even though all these years, so it's been this huge span of time in between you and I even having a casual conversation, yet here we we just picked up like we just saw each other yesterday. And
I wish you think about it, we gotta make sure this is a common thing now. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is just because you were getting into some good stuff. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of start off by setting a little bit of context, talk a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you're doing, and we'll get back into that flow that you were just in and stuff.
Now I gotta get back into the peak state. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I mean, it's really an honor. And I pushed you off a little bit because I was like, I'm working on a few things I just want to be ready for. I love the sign in the back. Just so everyone knows that I'm a father of 7 kids and Kevin's a father of 7 kids. So it's very rare to meet a kindred spirit on that journey as well. Because, I think it's unique and special if you're ever a parent of whether it's 1 or 100, but it's just there's just different dynamics at each phase of it. But still based here in Chicago, Illinois. I grew up in a family of 13 kids. All blue collar on the south side of Chicago. And I was the first to graduate, and I was the 12th of the 13. If you keep that in mind. And then just to give some context I was the first to be on track to get my degree in my nursing degree.
Okay.
And that's like right around that time. That's like when I stumbled across 2 audio tapes, Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale and Dennis Waitley's Psychology of Winning.
Okay.
And I started listening to those audio tapes, and it was the first time in my life, like I heard, like, you can set goals and you can achieve whatever it is you want. You live in the best country in the world. And I always had positive people around me. I was very fortunate that way, but no one had ever said to me, like, Ed, you can go be this thing that's out here called an entrepreneur. And so I went down that path, was totally broke for the next 7 years until I stumbled across, I had 2 people, James Malinchak and Randy Davis, in less than a week, tell me that there's this guy, Dan Kennedy, that you got to listen to his create a marketing system, not just be a speaker, which is what I was trying to do. I was trying to be the next Tony Robbins. And then once I learned the power of direct response marketing, everything changed. I saw everything as, like a sales letter, everything as like, who am I selling to? I turned my knowledge into information. And at the time I was working with athletes, like volleyball players is one of my core passions. Played collegiately, have coached for 30 years, but in and out now as the kids are getting older. And I created a couple audio programs and video programs. And then I realized that I'm going to be broke for the rest of my life if I keep trying to sell to coaches, people who don't have money. It's a small market. The internet really wasn't a thing. So in fairness, if there's people out there monetizing that now, it was a totally different game back then. Like when I went and rented a list, there was only like 2,300 registered coaches in the database for me to direct mail. And I licensed someone's product, went into the dental market, and I started doing the how to get patients who pay, stay, and refer to dentists at the age of 26, 27, zero experience, frankly, I was making up everything as I was going along, and leveraged the power of mentors. And then, did that for about 12 years, really, really grew one of the largest dental coaching programs at the time, segued into supplements for a good 10 years. And then I can tell you now what I'm doing, but it's been quite a journey. So now what's really cool, Kevin, and I'll be quiet in like 30 seconds, everybody. But I have this it's like Kevin and I, before we jumped on the call, we were talking about like the power of this podcast and the relationship podcast. And something I've always loved doing is I always love talking to people like you are, and for my coaching life, I love finding what's unique about someone.
Yeah.
And like, how do we sell that better for them? And then I take the power of all of my direct response marketing and I've packaged it into what I call the $1 million interview method, where I take experts who sell high ticket or premium services, and then I spend a day with them, helping them craft the perfect interview, which I then interview them. And then we go through their whole business model of how to sell it, how to price their high ticket program, how to syndicate it. And then I bring some of my resources to the table for them. And so I'm doing that, and I love it, because what I found is, being someone who doesn't like bragging about myself, I like talking about other people, like yourself. It's more fun, it's more exciting. Is that it's way more natural to have someone like myself brag about you than you brag about yourself. Totally. And so, can I tell one little case study on that? Is like, this is a classic.
You talk about whatever you feel is what we'll talk about.
No, but you can tell I'm excited about it, because I was hired. A guy hired me for $25K for a day of consulting. He sold a $60,000 coaching package, and he wanted to do a $100,000 coaching package. He then hired me to like spend 3 months like as a advisor to his marketing team. And after the first meeting with his marketing team, I was like, hey, Bill, I love you and I love them, but I just need to interview you, because this is not working. Like, this wasn't working, because they were so off on a different island from the value that he created for his clients, that they wanted to talk about tactics and strategies of like, that are cool, shiny objects. I'm like, dude, you have the perfect expert as your boss. You're just not seeing what's unique about them. And so I helped them just flip the whole marketing with one interview. And I mean, when people watch that interview, they buy high ticket $65,000 coaching from them, and it's I get really excited about that, so.
Yeah. And you're right. It is, I love finding unique things out about people, because then it's like, it's really easy for me to talk about them and even rave about them, and even be like, you know what, I can totally hook you up. I can introduce you to that person, and I love being that guy, man. I love being that guy, And
Kev, what I want to say to everybody who's listening is like, what I've found is that super high achievers have like there's something really dysfunctional about them that they're hiding. And what I mean by dysfunctional, I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, everybody. It's like the movie X-Men. They're hiding it, but it's secretly their superpower.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can't read. I'm severely dyslexic. I get distracted very easily. But they're like geniuses when it comes to like seeing the business picture, the strategy, the math of money.
Yeah.
But they can't do anything on paper, and they're embarrassed by that and they're ashamed by that. When I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, you don't realize like this is your story.
Yeah.
And let me pull that out of you, because there's 30% of the population have learning disabilities. Most of them are undiagnosed, so they've grown their whole life shamed about it. Like I can go down that story, but we don't go down there. But it's like, how do you take what you're hiding, or you think is your dysfunction, or you think like is your inadequacy, and transform that into your superpower? And I was bankrupt. Well, hey, guess what? You're bankrupt, and then you figured it out. Let's bring that out early. Like, let me help you craft that message, so it's actually why people should hire you. So so you can tell I get passionate in sports. When I work with athletes, there's a lot of people who look at, like, if you walk into a gym and everybody on the team looks the same, there's some value in that. Like, okay, they run the same system and they run the same thing. But the fact is that there's so many high level competitors who they just do things different. But if the coach phrases it as like, I just need you to make a very good athletic movement or be in a very athletic position, and then you help them work their athletic position, well, then they don't need to look like everybody else. They could be uniquely different. And I could get her superpower working for her by allowing her to be herself. Quick story on that. If any of your friends, anyone listening is a fight fan, you ever watch Ultimate Fighting Championship or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of my really good friends is Dominic Cruz.
Okay.
Dominic was 145 pounder. He ended up starting that like division. I might be wrong by a weight by like a few up or down, maybe 152. But they didn't have a division for him when he was fighting. He ends up flying out to San Diego by himself, puts himself in a fight by himself, a pro fight in San Diego. And he ended up going into a division that was 10 pounds heavier than him. Kind of stupid, kind of crazy. And the guy who was running the whole the event was also a professional coach and a fighter, a guy by the name of Eric Del Fiero. And when they were signing Dom in, I don't know exactly like when they were signing him, Eric was like, hey man, who's here to corner you? And he's like, I don't got a corner. Eric's like, all right, I'll corner you. And Dominic had like this weird fighting style. He still has it today. Weird is unique. Everybody wanted to change his fighting style. And Dominic Del Fiero was wise enough to be like, your footwork and your weirdness is actually what makes it so unique and why you're so hard to hit. And so they 10 times into his difference rather than trying to put him back where everyone else is. And you know, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's just such a unique guy. He was 3-time champion and just such an amazing person. But anyhow, I think that's kind of a good message for all of us, just to keep reminding ourselves. You know?
Totally. You know, and I as you're sharing that, I think of, you know, my wife, you know, she'll be having conversations with the kids or whatever, and when she gets off the phone with them, I'm like, honey, did you ask them about this? And she's like, no, I wouldn't even think to ask them about that. Why would I ask them about that? And I'm of course like, why wouldn't you? You know, and like, but that I am like this naturally inquisitive person, and I ask a lot of questions. And when I was a kid, my teachers would say, you ask too many questions, you ask too many questions or whatever, you know. But yet that has become one of my biggest gifts, one of my biggest superpowers, is because I am just naturally inquisitive, and I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love hearing about what they're working on, what they're excited about, what challenges they're dealing with, and I just love asking questions, and then I just get totally like, what are they going to tell me, you know? And then I just default naturally to, who do I know that might be able to help them with this?
Well, that's your unique ability, to quote Dan Sullivan there. You know, you had said something at the beginning, I don't know if we recorded or not, but it's actually a chapter in my book called Time Collapsing. Because one of the things I was learning when I was going through like Tony Robbins and NLP was just the power of languaging. And so when I wrote my book Time Collapsing, I was trying to see like to clarify speed to results, and part of that's modeling. And what I noticed by going through a lot of really successful like billionaires, of people like who invented things, whether it was Uber, whether it was Airbnb, whether it was even if you listen to Tesla, I'm trying to think. I can almost like my friend Jesse Itzler with when he created the company, he sold the airplane mode to NetJets, even Sarah Blakely with Spanx. And you said at the beginning of the podcast, you're like, the phrase is, the freedom question is like, wouldn't it be great if? Like, that's the opening phrase that like I saw like on every interview I listened to, people would say, well, I invented this because out of frustration. And I said, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if I was able to do this? And like you said, wouldn't it be great if I was able to interview people, build relationships, and this is what I focused on, and build a business around it. And like one of the things that I was trying, like I always look at Joe Polish's and listen to Dan Sullivan. I listen to the two of them talk together, and I'm always like, man, I feel like such a loser because they like figured out how to like make life easier, lucrative, and fun. And where I feel like I love learning so much that I keep complicating crap. And I was like, well, what if I was able to just like make my life easier, but having massive impact in people? And what I did on accident, Kev, is I looked back on a couple of my consulting relationships where after like consulting with them, I was like, man, can I just interview you? Because this is just like, I will pull out all your sales points. And I like talking to people. So anyhow, that's like, there's a couple other things I do in my life that I just, I need to spend more time doing because, and it's really a permission thing. Like we got to give ourselves more permission to be like, hey, if you love that, man, just keep doing that because you can build an economic system around that,
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Well, okay. So we've definitely done a really good job of setting a little bit of context here. And so people know a little bit about who Ed is and what makes you tick, Ed. So let's switch gears just a little bit. And I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners.
Sure.
So have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Ed, I'm stoked to hear your story, your experience around these most valuable relationships in your life.
Well, Kev, do you know what a Gestalt is? Like from Gestalt therapy?
No.
Okay. Well, it was an old therapy before like Richard Bandler and a lot of these guys who built out NLP. It's like when you get like a lump of like past memories that sit into like one big clump, and then they call it a Gestalt, or it's just like a big chunk. So I'm gonna give a big chunk on a few people, and then you're gonna see the lineage, right? So I can go down the pathway of like when I was introduced to Dan Kennedy and then how that whole thing go. I'm not going to go that route. I have a feeling that a lot of the people that have been on your podcast before have come from the GKIC world. So one of the other worlds that I came from was I stumbled into, and this is probably really common, is the Perry Belcher, Ryan Dice, Roland Frazier world of the War Room. And out of that came the relationship of two of the people I want to honor on this podcast, which are Vinny Fisher and Jeff Usner. Both of them, and the reason I want to give them special shout out on, especially on this podcast, because this is a hard question to give, is I measure people's relationship in my life by their ability to show up when things have gotten hard for me, not for their ability to be in my life when things have been easy. And I would say that Jeff and Vinny, Vinny's the CEO and founder of Fully Accountable. He's a partner in multiple companies. Jeff exited a technology, a multiple technology marketing pieces that he built from scratch back when he was just doing an affiliate marketing thing. And now he's doing some amazing things in, I believe it's Hershey, Pennsylvania. He's got a Christian church that he's the pastor of, that he invented, he created it. And now he's teaching people financial freedom through short-term rentals. And he's got a really great angle on the short-term rental market of creating luxury rentals versus just trying to compete with where 90% of the market's at. Okay. So those are two people there. I don't know what else you want me to say about them, but I can probably talk for days.
Well, and I don't know Jeff, but I do know Vinny, and I love Vinny. And so what I would like to have you do is just talk a little bit about those two gentlemen and what kind of impact that they've had on you personally, and what has transpired. So talk about each other. How'd you meet? How'd you guys?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so probably can't share how we all met. No, I'm kidding. We were hanging out with Perry Belcher at that time. Things could have been a little blurry. No, if anyone
don't have to cover all the details, but I get
it. If anyone wants a chance, actually, no. So Vinny was really funny. So I was at a War Room event. We were in Vegas, and Vinny grabs me and goes, "Hey, you're coming with us." And I It's like, all right. So I left my bag in the room and off we went. There was like probably a dozen guys. We had a great night. But I didn't really know who Vinny was. Now, so more importantly is that he's been there to really help me, mentor me through thinking through businesses from a perspective of like really from an economic perspective, and then keeping things simple. And they both have the ability to keep it very, very simple. More so I mean, that's just kind of a big picture. I mean, if you want to know specifics as far as like their best advice, I don't know if I really have any of it. I can say that one of the things that Vinny says a lot that comes to my mind is never go to the store hungry. One of the most important, never go to the store hungry. Because like, so if you're struggling with something, you don't have to make fast decisions. What I was saying to you before we jumped on this call was the worst thing you could ever do, especially if you're a kind of a A+ driver, alpha entrepreneur, which we all are at some level. You don't survive and struggle and battle through doing these things on your own. If you don't have that grit in you, like there's definitely going through the fire moments, I think, in all facets of life, you know? What I was saying before this was just, and I'm going to segue a little bit, but is just the worst thing you can ever do is trying to isolate yourself.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out all on your own. And so, you know, having Vinny as a great relationship, having Jeff as a great relationship, and I'm going to throw another guy, Ed Clay, in that group, but well, I'll talk about him in a second. Jeff, on the other hand, Jeff's a very unique guy and just keeping things super simple. So Jeff created a really simple model of, he calls it reverse online profits, right? And he just has an amazing story that I encourage everybody to look him up and follow him up, because his journey of going through deep in debt to literally asking for God to help, whisper in his ear, like, I can't do this on my own, to his map method and process all came from that. And he can tell it way better than I ever could. But I would say, Jeff, I call him my spiritual godfather, because he's somebody I ask, like, if I ever need something, I send my text message to him. I say, you know the Bible way better than I ever do, and you're better at praying. So here's what's on my list today, and can you get after it? You know, and so those two guys. Now I got to mention one more person. So one of my best friends is a guy by the name of Ed Clay. I met Ed Clay in Nashville at a GKIC event. And Kevin, you want to talk about somebody worth interviewing for this podcast? There's two guys, Ed Clay and his partner, Scotty Nelson. They run a hospital down in Tijuana called Chipsa Hospital. Both of them are former professional fighters, right? And the way Ed ended up down in Tijuana is because 12, 13, maybe 14 years ago, he ended up on pain pills because he was a professional fighter, blew out his knee. Doc put him on whatever it was, hydrocodone or whatever they were. He couldn't get off them, like so many people. So, and this is part of our drug epidemic, which other people probably on your podcast were able to speak to better than me. And that, you know, for most people, leads to accelerating and then possibly heroin and possibly, you know, overdoses, and now fentanyl's in the picture. So it's a serious thing. But he knew he wanted to get off of it. So he ended up going down. The doctor said to him, hey, Ed, here's the deal. They don't have what you need in America. You got to go down to Tijuana. You got to go down to Mexico. So he goes down to Mexico. They give him Ibogaine. And I'm no doctor, so you got to do all the research on your own and figure it out. But there's a lot of research coming out now that can back up a lot of this stuff better than I can. 4 days later, 0 withdrawals, never has the urge to be on pain pills at all. At the time, his mom had severe rheumatoid arthritis, like in a wheelchair, young lady, probably 60 years old. I could be off by a year or two, maybe 57. And she's already in a wheelchair, and it was progressing. Okay. And guess what the doctors were doing? Just giving her more meds, which, you know, I don't know enough about rheumatoid arthritis to speak about it, so I won't. I'll keep this story short. So he's saying, well, wouldn't it be great if, to go back to the story, or wouldn't it be awesome if there was something that could help my mom down here? He hears about this thing called Gerson therapy, which is a way to totally detox the body. It resets, stops attacking the body, and allows people to heal. They used it back in the 60s, 70s, and maybe even 80s, maybe still now at some level for cancer.
Okay.
But and Ed would say today, the thing is that there's got to be an integrative approach. You can't just do this one side or the other. So I'll keep moving for speed of the and timelines. Anyhow, he's in a cab with the cab driver, and he's on a road, and he points over at a hospital that's off in the distance, and he says to the cab driver, he says, "What is that hospital over there?" He goes, "Oh, that's Gerson Hospital. It just closed down a few months ago." He finds out what happened. They ran out of money. Make a long story short, he raises the funds, buys the whole hospital. His mom, reignites it because they had a full staff. They had doctors, they had nurses, they had everything. Puts his mom through Gerson therapy. That was 13 years ago. She's walking to this day, man.
Wow.
Walking. She looks vibrant. So they've evolved. They have it's a full cancer hospital. And now if you watch Joe Rogan's show, they have a whole stem cell building called Cellular Performance Institute, which Joe Rogan talks about, because a lot of the fighters, the pro fighters, go down there for their stem cell injections, and they keep going on Joe Rogan's show talking about it. And Joe's actually friends with Eddie and Scotty from back in the day. So you want to talk about an interesting character? Here's two guys. One was a drug addict, and Scotty's got a lot of issues that he could tell you about himself, but they're both back. Scotty doesn't drink anymore. He's amazing. And they probably only almost went bankrupt a dozen times on this journey. And I can't, for me to say what their whole labs and stems, I think they're on path to be a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Wow.
But here's why I bring them up. Not because of the story, because when I've struggled, which I struggle a lot, just so everybody understands, being a father of 7, having a daughter battling Lyme disease, having a daughter that went through long COVID, it wrecked me for probably 2.5 years. I still to this day just have a different perspective on when I see parents and with children going through stuff. I could be brought to tears faster than anything, because it just you want your heart to be hurt. Have a kid struggling, it's just fact, And those guys were the first ones to be fly her down, let's go, we'll just treat her for free. Those guys, Ed and Scotty, I've called them when I had no money. I've called them when I've been my richest, and they're quickest to pick up the phone when I'm struggling. So all 4 of those guys, since I lumped them in, and I met, and just another guy, since we're talking, is the power of connections. I met Eddie and Scotty through Lloyd Irvin, and he's another guy in my circle of trust that, if I had the FBI at my door, I just named the 5 guys I'd probably text. Be I don't know what's going on. I didn't do it, but I don't think they care anymore if you do it or not. I'm going to be sitting next to Andrew Tate once they arrest him in Chicago.
Oh, well,
sorry, man. I could ramble. And there's so many people I'm leaving out. So I'm sure everyone feels this way when they start going down this trail. But
well, the cross. Well, and what you brought up Lloyd's name, man. I think the last time I even saw her, I had about as much interaction with Lloyd as I did with you, but it was the same time frame. It was the same time frame years ago. Through Dan Kennedy was how I met Lloyd and his wife Vicky at the time too. Was through my association with Dan Kennedy and Glazer Kennedy. And you talked about Vinny, and I got to give a shout out to Vinny too, because in fact, Vinny was one of the one of the first interviews I did with this podcast, because I was in close connection with Vinny at the time. And so he's one of the first guys. But Vinny was also one of those guys who has just been instrumental in my life, and just really being there and allowing me to just spread my wings a little bit and just have this experience of going down this path and just kind of like really stepping into, and just growing as a person, just stepping into being able to do what I do now. Vinny's had a huge role in that. And so I just wanted to make sure and just give him a shout out too, because man, I'm just so appreciative to Vinny. I love Vinny, and I just love the person he is, the way he shows up, and yeah, he's doing some amazing stuff in this world. And so for you, Ed, you've met, you talked about Vinny, you've talked about Jeff, you've talked about Ed and his partner Scotty. And if you look at, like, we just look at and you've also mentioned, Dan Kennedy and Perry and Ryan and Roland too. And you briefly mentioned Lloyd. But if you think about like these core, I mean, and you also even said there's a whole lot of other people I could talk about. But I mean,
1,000%.
If you look at some of the people you've talked about just here today, and if you look at any one of these relationships, what is one thing that stands out that has come from one of these relationships where it has just really allowed you to make a really big impact in this world, where hands down, it would have never happened if not for that one relationship? And I'm sure you could come up with lots of examples, but what's something that when I say that just kind of comes to mind for you?
Well, I mean, that's really unfair. That's really unfair. The word that
fairness, you could tell lots of stories, Ed. You really could.
I'm going to say I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to say the first thing that comes to my mind about all of them is non-judgmental. Mm-hmm. So let me just say that. So that's,
yeah.
So I'll just say that, because that's really important. I'll tell you why. And I don't know if all the gurus, I think when you're younger, and I'm going to answer your question, but I mean, unless you're kicking me off the podcast, do we have a few extra minutes? Okay.
You're totally fine, Ed.
So I think like when you're younger, you care a lot. I'll just speak from first person. So that's fair for everybody. I cared more about I think one thing Dan Kennedy got right, but also kind of is a problem in today's society, is back when he would be teaching about like creating your character. And I don't know if you remember this when Dan's right on this. I'm not, this is like a form of branding, but like being a superhero and being so powerful, and this is why you should hire these famous speakers and drive these types of cars and have this types of worldly appearance. I think that's a trap in a lot of ways, because today everything that makes me most happy and fulfilled has nothing to do with any of that, and so I look at how much time, money, energy, and relationships were wasted on that path. These were just transactional relationships; they weren't in depth. Anyhow, I will say one of the things, I'll give a specific example, and this goes to Ed Clay, okay? Because this goes to Ed Clay, and I would be going down such different directions with all of them that they're all non-judgmental. They won't care. But one thing, when I was looking at starting my podcast, it was when I was getting out of the supplement business, and I was like, I want to focus on my personal brand and write a book, and that was time collapsing, and then start a show. I didn't know what that would look like. And it's so funny, is like now 13 years later, I feel like I'm just getting clarity on like, Ed, it's just going to be your show. And these are the core elements, and this is how we're monetizing it. So there is a business component of it. Like, we're not just like, there is offerings of value you can have that make direct sense. And anyhow, I'll get to the story. So Ed goes, well, hey, why don't you come down to Nashville and I'll introduce you to a lot of people. And I didn't really know Ed. I didn't know Ed super well. I met him through Lloyd at a Dan Kennedy Nashville super conference, GKIC super conference. awesome time. But fast friends we were. And so then we go down there, and Ed opened the door to like Taylor Swift's first producer, and then this famous person and this person, and we didn't know. And I remember saying, kind of how like I was like, hey Kev, I'm not ready to be on your podcast. Yes. I was trying to tell him like, dude, I'm not gonna fly down to Nashville because I don't even know what I'm doing yet. And he's like, no, come on. And on that day, we was when he sat across from me at a table and was like, hey dude, I'm gonna buy this hospital. And I just remember like that was we were both at very turning points in our life. And I wanted to put my like business cap on and be like, and start grilling him, like walk through it as a friend. And I didn't do that. Instead, I was like, awesome. Awesome. What's the plan? Like, how are we doing this? Like, how can I help? And so that our relationship then, since then, I've probably run like 9 or 10 seminars down in Nashville, hosted the after party at like his East Ivy mansion, met dozens and dozens and dozens of professional country artists and just some of the neatest friends that I have in my life now, because of that, like that day in that relationship. These guys down at what they're doing at Cellular Performance Institute. I'm sorry, but on call, come in. My realtor's here. It's like they're just getting like, we're 47. He's I think 5 years younger than me, and like they're just getting started on their next big journey, and I'm so freaking excited for them. And so I feel that way about all of my buddies. They're all doing amazing. But Ed's been the guy where like when, another guy just, we've had such great back and forth recently about just politics, religion, business, relationships, common sense. How can we disagree in this new world and not hate each other when we disagree? Like, how can we just have different views and it's, it's okay. So anyhow, I guess that's my story on that. And the lesson there was I didn't know so much about what that next journey had entailed. Like if you would have told me on Sunday, Ed, when you fly down tomorrow, doorway's gonna be open. You're gonna meet all these amazing country artists and these producers and all these amazing people, I would have been like, oh, it's a no-brainer. I'm going. Yeah. But instead, I was like, I don't even know why I'm going. And I've done this 100 times in my life, like whether it's an event or going somewhere. And just even last week, I went and spoke at an event and I met so many amazing people. And anyhow, I could talk about that topic all day long. So,
well, you said something that you kind of, attributed this trait to everybody that you mentioned during our conversation today, which is that none of these people are judgmental. Every one of them are completely non-judgmental and stuff. And that is such a huge thing. Because like that, when we can just be around people where we can share openly and candidly, and we know we're not going to get any judgment from anybody in the space. And in fact, we're going to be met with nothing but open arms from people who want the very best for us. Man, what an experience that is. And what, amazing things can come from that. And so I know.
Well, and Kev, from a time collapsing perspective, from getting what we want faster, it's all like and this is something I talk about. I could talk about this to athletes, and I could talk about so my friend's a professional baseball coach, and he played pro baseball. Check this out. He played pro baseball. And he asked me a question about coaching because it was his first time coaching a big league team.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, it's really simple. I go, A+ performers, world class athletes, the best thing you could ever do is remove friction in their life instead of adding to their play.
Yeah.
And part of removing friction is removing the judgment, the shame, the inner self-talk, and the operational belief systems that are preventing them. Like if I just said, look, bro, who cares? You're 0-5. No worries. Like you're good. You're good. You're the best. I mean, you're the, and so like, if you ever hear me as a parent, like when I watch my kids play, I never, like, even though I've coached in national championships for volleyball, you'll never hear me from the stands ever tell them anything tactically or strategical. You'll never hear it. Even though I could see the whole game in my head, it's just going, right? Mm-hmm. So what you'll hear me say to other kids on the team are like Addie, I'm making up names, like, Evie, whatever their names are. Hey, Evie, you're the best right now in this spot. You're the best right here. Like just putting that into you're the best right here. You're the best, just pushing that in their brain because they're fighting with negative self-talk. Yeah. Be aggressive, kiddo. You got this, Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge. Well, Ed, for anybody listening to this, it's like, man, Kev, I really like Ed. I like what he stands for. I like the way he shows up. How can they find out more info on what you're doing and all that?
Well, first of all, man, you've inspired me. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna be really busy listening to every single podcast, man. I mean, I think what you're doing is just incredible. Number one, I mean, share Kevin's podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it and comment so he gets the rankings. We need more go-givers like this guy right here. This is pretty amazing. So that's number one. Number two, you could private message me on through Facebook and let me know how you believe I can serve you or how I can support you, whether it's through our interview service or if you ever want to come to an event. And EdO'KeefeLive.com is being updated. That's my website. So I'll have my upcoming events and opportunities to whether you want to do half days of consulting or as we grow that side of the business. Do you know Dean Graziosi?
I do.
Yeah, see, I knew you would know Dean. I know Dean because he's another guy I admire I'm like, I feel so inadequate when I watch Dean. He's so good at what he does,
He's brilliant. He's brilliant.
That whole self-milking cow thing. I'm like, I'm still milking, Dean. I'm still milking over here. My mittens aren't on. I'm still doing crap. My vision is to take my show and really hone how I can best serve people and try to create the one-day workshops, maybe 2 days, half-day consulting, and then the interview service, and then and let that morph out. It'll get clearer as we keep helping people and trying to work through those things. But hey, man, you're the best, Kev. I mean, more importantly, I hope everybody shares what you're doing, and this has been so much fun.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I really appreciate you and just really appreciate all that you shared from your heart today. And any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, two things. One, if you're struggling, reach out to somebody. You can reach out to me or Kevin, but you're not alone. So that's on a personal note. No money, nothing. Don't worry about a thing. If you need something and you're like, I'm in a bad spot, I don't know what I'm gonna do, do not hide in a closet. Ping somebody, okay? It's very important. My friend Nick Norris, another guy who's on my list, Navy SEAL, they work a lot with military, with PTSD and preventing suicide. But it's very important, I think, right now in our society that if you're alone, you don't stay alone. These devices are programming us to stay alone. Okay? That's number one. Number two, on the flip side of that, it's very okay for you to have limitations for what's acceptable in your ecosystem with yourself and your family. It's a good time to create, what are our family values, our priorities, and what's important to us? What do we accept? What do we not? It doesn't mean you're judging it. It's just meaning I think it's a great opportunity to sit, because this is what we're going through right now with our kids. We got 4 in high school and then 3 in grade school. Very impressionable ages. Hey, we can still love people and be accepting and be giving and being whatever, but there's things that are not tolerated, and everyone has to do it. It's okay to do that. That doesn't mean you're being hateful, or it doesn't mean you're being it doesn't even mean you're being judgmental. It means this is what we stand for as a family or in our household.
Yeah.
And you stick with it. I think that's an important topic that I'm trying to articulate. I'm journaling a lot on, because I think we need some non-emotional people that can bring common sense to really tough topics.
Mm-hmm. And
maybe on a different podcast, or maybe you and off camera, we could talk about that another time. But it's okay to be strong in your belief systems. That doesn't mean you're hateful. So I think there's a little bit of counterbalance. And you and I could disagree, and it doesn't mean we can't still like each other. Like those are a lot of positive things. So
that's right.
So otherwise, man, be kind to yourself, work hard, and be kind to yourself. And then if you feel like you're alone, find a mentor, find a model, and reach out and become a part of a community, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Ed, once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day, man.
All right, brother. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kevin. This has been awesome.
Yeah.